right, welcome back. It's Pushing the Limits on a Thursday. Obviously, I wish we could report on some good news today, but the breaking news, the national news, of course, RJ reporter Jeff Harmon brutally murdered, stabbed to death, and it looks like the person who did it, he's been charged with murder, allegedly, is a guy by the name of Rob Tellis, a lawyer who practiced probate and estate law and won his elected position in 2018 as a Clark County public administrator. Well, the person we have with us on the line right now is the campaign manager for Patsy Brown, who is attempting to take that seat as the Clark County public administrator. And Andre did know Rob Tellis, so I appreciate him coming on and talking to us now. Andre, I appreciate you being here. I certainly wish it was under better circumstances, though. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for having us on the show today.
Absolutely. I guess this would be my first question. What was your relationship with Rob? Obviously, you knew him. I don't know how close you were to him. Do you recall the first time you met him, and how long have you known Rob Tellis for?
Can I say, before I answer that question, first, Patsy Brown, we want to send our condolences, thoughts, and prayers to Jeff German, his family, his coworkers, the staff at the RJ, and all of the journalists in Las Vegas for what happened.
Absolutely. Yes, very well said. Yep, go ahead.
To answer your question, interesting twist. I've known Rob Tellis actually for several years, probably 7 or 8 years. Patsy's known Rob for probably about 5 years. As recently as 2019, we hosted a trunk or treat at Glow Zone near IKEA. And Rob Tellis, his wife, and his children were there. And we actually had a nice conversation with them for 10 or 15 minutes, talking about family. The Rotary Club, we're all Rotarians. We talked about business and family, and he actually offered to give me a tour of his office.
Do you recall the last conversation you had with him? Do you remember when it was, and what were you guys talking about, if you don't mind me asking?
It was actually just probably December of last year or January of this year. And I was actually sharing with Rob that Patsy was going to be running for public administrator, giving him a courtesy notice because we were, friendly with one another.
Gotcha.
And,
what were your impersonations of him? I mean, you've known him for several years. You mentioned Patsy's known him for about 5 years. Before this story comes out, right? What was kind of your feelings about him as a person? What were your, what are your thoughts on that?
You know what? He was a nice guy, appeared to be a loving husband, a great family guy, very mild-mannered, but one of the things that changed that opinion is months ago, Rob Tellis, Patrick Cassell, and a few other candidates, they appeared on an endorsement interview with Veterans in Politics. And it's filmed. It's on YouTube. You can watch it. And Rob was very disenchanted, very disgruntled, very angry. He seemed off. And Patsy was not there to participate in that. She was away on business, but she watched the interview afterwards, and I remember Patsy saying to me, something's wrong with him. Something's very wrong. He seems different. I don't know what's going on with that guy. He looks like he could snap any minute. And, my initial response was, well, maybe you're overlooking that. Maybe you're reading into that the wrong way. Maybe you're just saying that because you're running for the same public office. But unfortunately, to my surprise, I was wrong.
Well, that's interesting to me. So your wife, Patsy Brown, had an inclination. She noticed. You're telling me she noticed there's something not right with this guy, Rob Tellis. There's something not right with him. There's something going on with him. Obviously, she was right, but that's some pretty interesting intuition. And she noticed that just by his mannerisms, you're saying?
She did, and I didn't see it. And it's amazing because, women's intuition, it's real. I mean, she called it. I'm going to be honest. I thought she overreacted. I thought she was exaggerating, but clearly I was wrong.
Wow, that's interesting to me. And now when you first heard this news, Andre, knowing this guy, you and your wife, knowing Rob Tellis, when you first heard that he was under investigation, and then, of course, yesterday, being charged with murder. What went through your mind, you and your wife? Like, what's going through your mind?
Well, for myself, I immediately went into protection mode. I think any good husband, when he hears of nearby danger that can harm his family, he's going to go into protection mode. So I immediately went into protection mode. Patsy Brown has a security detail that's with her. You've probably seen them. I made sure that the kids were okay, made sure that the house was secure, and here's some things we can do to make sure we're safe and just be extra cautious. Now, as far as Patsy Brown, it actually started coming to a head yesterday because when we were together, we were getting something to eat, and she just broke down crying. And I said, "Hey, what's wrong? What's going on?" And it took her a few minutes to calm herself and gather her thoughts. And she says, "Well, you know what happened?" She says, I was running in the same office with this guy. I've been at the same place with this guy. You know this guy. You talk to this guy. He's been very public about how he feels." She goes, "My father's not here. He's dead." She goes, "Normally, when I'm afraid or something major happens, I call my father." She goes, "My dad passed away a few weeks ago. I can't call him."
That's very
So
sad. Yeah, I'm
she
sorry to hear. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, so so she has a lot of emotions going on, which is why you're talking to me now and not her.
No, I understand that. I sympathize with that. When you say that you were, worried about security, were you afraid at the time that of Rob? Why do you say that? I'm curious. When you said you were taking security precautions.
Because you know what, with what Rob did, sometimes you think you know people and you don't. And if he did that to Jeff and he was angry with Jeff about that, he could do it to anybody. And I mean, if you read the series of stories that came out in the RJ, unfortunately, Jeff was the messenger. But the person who Rob is really mad at is Rita Page Reed. That's where the whole feud and the back and forth and the hostile office, it was Rob versus Rita. And, as Patsy Brown's campaign manager and as a husband, I knew there was a possibility that Rob could lash out at all the candidates who were running for public administrator and opposing him, especially considering that Rob recently lost the primary in June. So I didn't want to take a chance or leave anything, to guess.
I understand that. When you hear the news, you don't know what this guy could be capable of. You knew him, of course, your wife running for the same position that Tellus had or at the time. So yeah, no, I can understand where you're coming from there. No question about it. So moving forward now, I don't even know how to ask this question, but I mean, your wife is looking for that same seat. She's running for that same seat that Tellus was in. We know the stories that came out, the infidelities would tell us, the situation with what was taking place in the workplace. Your wife wanting that seat now, I mean, obviously we need to change. What is your wife saying about this position these days?
You know what? You're right. We do need a change, and we're right now waiting to see. Jeff Gurman was working on another story that he was planning to release, and this one was actually about Rita Page Reed, and it had a lot of negative implications of her. And the reason I know about the story is just a few weeks ago, Patsy Brown spent almost 45 minutes having a phone conversation with Jeff Gurman. And he was interviewing her, and she was sharing information that she knew about the office and about Rita Page Reed. And, Jeff was asking her about, the NRS codes and the actual function of the office. So I don't know what he had, but Jeff has something juicy against Rita Page Reed. And so now that this happened, even though Rob did it, I mean, we're looking at Rita. Right. And it's like, wow, because, Rob did what he did, or as is being investigated now, he's alleged to have murdered Jeff. But we also know at the top of this also is Rita Page Reed. The back and forth, the provoking. We've heard rumors that Rita Page Reed hired the private investigator who followed Rob, who filmed him, who then turned that over to Jeff. And that's not confirmed, but we're hearing a lot of things. But definitely Rita Page Reed had contributed to the animosity, the hostility, the bullying, the stuff going on in the office. And unfortunately, it came to a head with Rob doing what he did. and now we're mourning the loss of Jeff German. So, our prayers and thoughts even go out to the staff. I mean, the people working for the public administrator. When you see the boss and the second in command going at it, and the office is split, there's emails, there's videos, there's verbal confrontations, and then the county has to bring in a third party to kind of come keep the peace and squash it. And then now we're talking about murder, and now we're talking about people in that office. And it was Rob and Rita going back and forth. That's scary, because if Patsy, God willing, wins the election, if Rita's still there, what happens now? Is Rita going to send emails? Is she going to get a private investigator? Is she going to fight? Is the office going to be divided? What is the climate going to be there?
Well, no question, Andre. There's been a lot of dysfunction in those offices. There's no question about that. But I'm sure you will agree with me. Even if everything you just said about Rita is true, there is no and I know you're not saying this, but there is no justification taking it to the next level of taking somebody's life. Yeah.
There's not. There never is. I don't. That was senseless.
Yeah, there's no question. Well, I can't imagine. Listen, I can't say. I guess this is a good thing. I've never known anybody personally that took somebody else's life. I can't imagine what you guys are going through and the emotions. I mean, this is just shocking. I mean, this has shocked the community. It's turned into a national story. And I talk about journalists, and Andre, since 1990. Almost 2,700 journalists have been killed. And this is sadly, you got to add Jeff now to that list. And, I just had Ron Friedchild from Channel 8 on, and he was a friend of Jeff's. And everybody I've talked to said this guy was a really, really good journalist. He was good. He didn't go after people for the enjoyment of going after people. He covered stories and facts, and he did his job. And it sounds like he did that when it comes to Rob Tellis, and Tellis didn't like it. And he just snapped. I mean, that's what it sounds like to me.
Right. Yeah. And the thing is, Jeff German and Patsy Brown became close real fast. Even though, the story about the office and Patsy running for that office, even though that's what initially brought them together, they did develop quickly a friendship, a level of trust and comfort with one another. So it's not just some guy she had a phone call with or happened to know. No, there was a budding relationship there. And, I mean, in my experience, the only time I've heard of journalists and media people, being murdered or kidnapped, there's a war. It's overseas. It's in a third world country. And you know what I mean? They were covering, something like that, but never someone like Sweet Jeff, who does a good job, who's, never met a stranger, who's friendly, never someone like him, and never in Las Vegas, Nevada.
I guess this would be my last question for you, and I guess it's a loaded question. How does yourself and your wife put this in perspective, knowing that you hung out with this guy who clearly, I mean, I know we're supposed to use the term allegedly, but the evidence is overwhelming. I mean, there's basically video of him doing this horrible crime, doing the deed, doing this horrible act. How do you put this in perspective with your wife, knowing that you were hanging around a man who most likely took a journalist's life because he didn't like some articles you wrote about him? How do you put that in perspective?
That's a great question. One of the things is this, and we're fearful for Rita, and it's this: you got to treat people right, whether you agree or disagree, whether you come from different places, whether one person has one position and the other person has another. Treat everybody decent. Treat them with respect. Don't be mean. Don't start a fight. If you can walk away from the fight, do that. Because you never know how another person is going to internalize that. You never know how they're going to respond. And you don't know how people are interpreting or translating what you say and what you do to them. Mm-hmm. If you think about bullying, for example, which has been, in the news cycles for years, you would hear about kids who go online and tell a person, you should hurt yourself or you should do this or that. And the person does it. But legally in court, the people who were the antagonists of that, they were found civilly and sometimes criminally liable and responsible. So, I would just say, even to other candidates out there, I know how politics goes. I know people disagree. I know it gets passionate, but you know what? You don't have to hit below the belt. You don't have to be nasty. You don't have to push a person too far. Don't do it, because when you do that and you have the hostility in the environment going on in the office between Rob Tellis and Rita Page Reed, and Jeff was just doing his job, and now we are where we are, it's not worth it.
You're right. And Jeff, you're right. Jeff was just doing his job. He didn't incite anything. He was just writing articles and doing his job and reporting reporting on facts from what I can see, whether it be extramarital affairs, you name it. Why Rob Tellis, who just because he lost an election, he was still a successful attorney. He has a beautiful family from what I can see, beautiful wife and kids, to just throw it all away like this and take an innocent life because somebody wrote a few articles about you that were negative. By the way, you did it to yourself. To me, it just doesn't make any sense. Well, hopefully, Andre, we can get your wife here in studio next week. Obviously, you need a few more days to process all this. And I'm sorry, because, you guys are victims as well. You guys didn't do anything wrong. Anybody that knows Rob, maybe a friend, a family member, they're all victims as well. They didn't do anything wrong. Obviously, we think first of Jeff's family because he lost his life, brutally murdered. But there are a lot of victims here, and you guys are there as well. So please tell your wife I wish her the best. And I'm sorry you guys are going through this, Andre. And you're welcome to come in next week, and we'll talk later. But I do appreciate you coming on short notice, Andre, and I wish you guys well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. That is